The distress signal. The coffee had gone cold hours ago, but Dr. Marcus Rivera barely noticed. His eyes remained fixed on the data streaming across multiple monitors in the cramped confines of the Kepler Deep Space Monitoring Station. For 3 days, the same signal had been repeating from somewhere in the Vega sector, and Marcus was no closer to understanding what it meant than when he first detected it. The signal wasn't random noise or natural phenomena. It had structure, mathematics, patterns that screamed intelligence. But it wasn't human. Marcus had spent 15 years studying theoretical xenolinguistics, preparing for a moment like this. Now that it had arrived, he felt woefully unprepared. "Still working on that ghost signal?" Lieutenant Sarah Walsh asked as she entered the communications bay with 2 steaming cups of coffee. Sarah was the station's communications officer, a sharp woman in her early 30s who had volunteered for the isolated posting because she loved the quiet of deep space. "It's not a ghost," Marcus replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. "Look at this." He pointed to a series of waveforms on his screen. The pattern repeats every 47 minutes and 18 seconds, but there are variations, subtle changes that suggest meaning. Sarah leaned closer, studying the display. Could it be some kind of automated beacon? That's what I thought initially, but watch this. Marcus highlighted a section of the transmission. These modulations here, they're getting weaker. Whatever is sending this signal is losing power or... He paused, not wanting to voice his growing suspicion. "Or dying," Sarah finished quietly. Marcus nodded grimly. For the past 72 hours, he had watched the signal strength gradually diminish. If his analysis was correct, they had perhaps a week before the transmission faded entirely. The alert chime from the main communications console interrupted their conversation. Sarah hurried to answer the incoming call, her face growing serious as she listened to the encrypted message from Earth. "Dr. Rivera," she said, turning to Marcus with wide eyes. "The Secretary General wants to speak with you. Priority 1. 20 minutes later, Marcus found himself in a secure video conference with some of the most powerful people on Earth. Secretary General Chen Wei sat at the head of a polished table surrounded by military advisors, scientists, and government officials. The weight of their collective attention made Marcus acutely aware of his rumpled clothing and 3-day stubble. "Dr. Rivera," the Secretary General began, "we understand you've been analyzing an unusual signal from deep space. What can you tell us?" Marcus straightened his shoulders and began his briefing. "The signal originates from the Vega sector, approximately 25 light-years from Earth. It's clearly artificial, demonstrating mathematical principles and linguistic structures that indicate a highly intelligent species. However, the signal strength has been decreasing steadily, suggesting an urgent situation." Admiral James Knox, a stern man with silver hair and piercing blue eyes, leaned forward. "Are you saying this could be a distress call?" "That's my assessment, yes, sir. The repetitive nature, the mathematical framework, and the weakening signal all point to a species in crisis attempting to contact anyone who might be listening." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. First contact with an alien species had been theoretical for decades. The possibility that it might come in the form of a plea for help had never been seriously considered. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the director of the Institute for Xenobiological Studies, spoke next. "Dr. Rivera, how confident are you in this interpretation?" 73%, Marcus replied without hesitation. "I've run the signal through every analysis program we have. The mathematical progressions are too complex to be accidental, and the way the frequency modulates suggests emotional content." "Emotional content?" Secretary General Chen Wei raised an eyebrow. "Yes, ma'am. There are variations in the signal that don't serve any apparent mathematical or informational purpose. In human communications, we call these prosodic features. They convey mood, urgency, desperation." Admiral Knox's expression had grown increasingly grave. "Dr. Rivera, you're suggesting that somewhere out there, an alien species is crying for help." "That's exactly what I'm suggesting, sir." The debate that followed lasted 6 hours. Some officials argued that humanity wasn't ready for first contact. Others questioned whether they should respond to what might be a trap. A few suggested that intervening in alien conflicts could bring unwanted attention to Earth. It was Captain Sarah Chen who finally cut through the arguing. Sarah was a legend in the Earth Defense Force, a veteran of the Titan Wars and the architect of humanity's deep space exploration protocols. At 45, she had seen more combat than most officers twice her age, and her calm voice carried the weight of hard-earned experience. "With respect," she said, standing slowly, "we're debating the wrong question. The question isn't whether we should help. The question is whether we can live with ourselves if we don't." The room turned to face her, and Sarah continued. "For the past 2 hours, we've heard about risks and unknowns, but we've ignored the most important fact. Someone out there is in trouble, and they're calling for help. If we were in their position, stranded and desperate, wouldn't we hope that someone would answer?" Secretary General Chen Wei studied Sarah's face carefully. "Captain Chen, are you volunteering to lead a rescue mission?" "Yes, ma'am, I am." "You understand the risks? We're talking about a journey of months, possibly years, to a star system we know nothing about, to help a species we've never encountered, against an enemy we can't identify." Sarah's smile was grim but determined. "Ma'am, I've spent my entire career preparing for the unknown. This is what we trained for." The vote was closer than it should have been, but ultimately, humanity chose to answer the call. Within 72 hours, the largest deep space fleet in human history was being assembled at the Luna shipyards. Sarah stood on the observation deck of the UES Defiant, watching as supply ships ferried equipment and personnel to the 5 vessels that would make the journey. The Defiant was humanity's newest and most advanced starship, a kilometer-long vessel designed for extended deep space operations. Alongside her were the UES Intrepid, UES Pathfinder, UES Guardian, and UES Hope. Impressive sight, isn't it? Admiral Knox had approached quietly, his hands clasped behind his back as he gazed out at the bustling shipyard. "Yes, sir. Though I have to admit I never imagined my first command of a fleet would be a rescue mission for aliens." Knox chuckled. "Sarah, I've known you for 15 years. You've never backed down from helping someone in need, whether they were human or not. This mission suits you." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment before Knox spoke again. "The translation team made a breakthrough this morning. Dr. Rivera managed to decode part of the message." Sarah turned to face him, tension evident in her posture. "What does it say?" Knox's expression was somber. "It's not good. The species calls themselves the Zilani. They're under attack by something called the Korthak Empire. 3 of their colony worlds have already been destroyed, and their homeworld is next. How long do we have?" According to the message, the attack began 4 months ago. At the speed of light, that information is already 25 years out of date by the time it reaches us. For all we know, it could already be over. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine, but her resolve only strengthened. "Then we'd better not waste any more time." The launch ceremony was broadcast across the solar system. Billions of people watched as the 5 ships of Task Force Rescue prepared to engage their experimental Alcubierre drives. The technology was still new, barely tested beyond the outer planets, but it offered humanity's best hope of reaching the Zilani in time. Sarah stood on the bridge of the Defiant, surrounded by her crew. Commander Elena Vasquez, her second in command, was a brilliant, tactical officer who had earned her reputation during the asteroid mining conflicts. Chief Engineer David Park was a miracle worker who could keep engines running on spare parts and determination. Dr. Rivera had insisted on joining the mission personally, bringing with him a team of linguists and xenobiologists. "All ships report, ready for departure," Communications Officer Walsh announced from her station. Sarah took a deep breath and opened a channel to the entire fleet. "This is Captain Chen to all vessels. Today we make history. We're not just representing Earth or humanity. We're representing the idea that intelligence beings should help one another, regardless of the distance between them or the differences that separate them." She paused, looking around at the faces of her crew. They were afraid, but they were also determined. They were ready. The Zilani called out into the darkness, hoping someone would hear them. Today they learned that they weren't alone. Fleet, engage Alcubierre drives. Let's go save some lives. The 5 ships accelerated smoothly, their exotic matter engines warping space around them. Within minutes, they had exceeded the speed of light, disappearing into the void between stars on humanity's first interstellar rescue mission. Behind them, Earth continued its rotation, unaware that in a small monitoring station, Dr. Rivera's computers had just detected something new. The Zilani distress signal had changed. For the first time in weeks, it was getting stronger. The rescue mission, 8 months of faster-than-light travel, had tested the limits of both human endurance and starship engineering. The UES Defiance Alcubierre drive had required 3 major repairs. The crew had endured 2 significant psychological crises, and they had burned through their emergency food reserves during a reactor malfunction that lasted 6 weeks. But as Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge, watching the Vega system resolve on the main view screen, all of that seemed insignificant. "My God," whispered Dr. Rivera, his voice barely audible as he stared at the tactical display. "We're too late." The outer system was a graveyard. Debris fields stretched across millions of kilometers, the shattered remains of what had once been thriving colonies. Massive chunks of metal and composite materials drifted silently in the void, occasionally catching the light of Vega's brilliant blue-white star. Commander Elena Vasquez studied the sensor readings with professional detachment, though Sarah could see the tension in her shoulders. "I'm reading residual energy signatures consistent with plasma bombardment. The destruction patterns suggest orbital bombardment rather than surface-to-surface combat." "Any survivors?" Sarah asked, though she dreaded the answer. "Unknown, Captain. The debris is interfering with our sensors, but I am detecting some artificial structures in the inner system that appear to be intact." Chief Engineer Park looked up from his console. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission. It's weak, but it's definitely the same signal pattern Dr. Rivera identified." Sarah felt a spark of hope kindle in her chest. "Put it through the translation matrix." The bridge speakers crackled to life with a series of melodic tones that the ship's computer attempted to translate in real time. The voice that emerged was distinctly non-human, with a musical quality that rose and fell like a complex song. "Unknown vessels, please identify yourselves. We have little time. The Korthak will return soon." Dr. Rivera practically bounced in his seat. "Captain, this is incredible. The linguistic structure is unlike anything in our theoretical models. Their concept of time appears to be cyclical rather than linear, and they use harmonic frequencies to convey emotional context." "Dr. Rivera," Sarah said gently, "translation first, analysis later. Can you establish two-way communication?" "Yes, I believe so. The mathematical framework is consistent with what we observed in the distress signal." Sarah activated the communications system. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth vessel Defiant. We received your distress call and have come to offer assistance." The silence that followed lasted nearly a full minute. When the alien voice returned, the tones were higher, more complex. "Earth, you are from the death world? The madness world, where the ground shakes and fire falls from the sky?" Commander Vasquez raised an eyebrow. "They seem to know about us." "You came," the voice continued, and even through the translation matrix, the wonder was unmistakable. "Across the vast dark you came to help strangers. We are Zektar of the Zilani. We welcome you, though we fear we have little time to properly honor your arrival." Sarah leaned forward in her command chair. "Zektar, we're here to help. Can you guide us to survivors? We have medical supplies and can provide evacuation if necessary. Follow the beacon signal to the 4th planet. But beware, the Korthak fleet will return within 3 of your solar rotations. Their war leader Grix has sworn to claim our homeworld before the season changes." As the human fleet approached the inner system, the scale of the devastation became clear. 3 planets showed signs of recent bombardment, their surfaces scarred with crater chains and radiation signatures. But the 4th planet, a beautiful blue-green world similar to Earth, appeared undamaged. "It's a trap," Commander Vasquez said immediately. "No military commander would leave the primary target intact while destroying secondary colonies." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "Unless they're saving the best for last?" Dr. Rivera, what do we know about Zilani psychology? Very little, Captain. But based on their communications, they appear to be a highly social species with strong cultural emphasis on harmony and cooperation. The fact that they've survived this long suggests either exceptional defensive capabilities or... He paused, frowning. Or what? Or they're not seen as a threat by the Korthak. They might be preserving the homeworld for some specific purpose. The answer came as they entered orbit around the Zilani homeworld. The planet was beautiful, with vast crystal formations that caught and reflected sunlight in dazzling displays. Cities spiraled upward from the surface like delicate flowers, their architecture flowing and organic rather than the rigid geometric patterns favored by humans. But it was defenseless. The human fleet's sensors detected no military installations, no orbital weapons platforms, no defensive satellites. The Zilani had built a civilization based entirely on the assumption that no one would want to hurt them. Captain, communications, Officer Walsh called out. We're receiving an invitation to send a delegation to the surface. They want to meet us in person. 6 hours later, Sarah found herself standing in a chamber that defied every architectural principle she understood. The walls seemed to be made of living crystal that shifted color based on the emotional state of the occupants. The Zilani themselves were even more remarkable. Zektar stood nearly 3 meters tall, with 6 limbs that could function as either arms or legs depending on need. The alien's skin was translucent, revealing a network of bioluminescent organs that pulsed with soft light. Most striking were the eyes, large and multifaceted like those of an insect, but filled with an intelligence that was unmistakably sentient. Welcome, Captain Chen of Earth, Zektar said, the translator device rendering the musical tones into English. We are honored by your presence, though we grieve that our first meeting comes in such dark times. Sarah inclined her head respectfully. We're honored to meet you as well, Zektar, but we need to discuss your defense situation. Our scans show no military capabilities on your world. The Zilani's bioluminescent organs dimmed, a display that the translation matrix identified as sadness or resignation. We are not warriors, Captain Chen. Our species evolved on a world without predators, without scarcity, without conflict. The concept of deliberately harming another being is difficult for us to comprehend. Dr. Rivera stepped forward, his scientific curiosity overriding diplomatic protocol. Zektar, how have you survived the Korthak attacks until now? We hide. We flee. We hope. The alien's light patterns shifted to what the computer identified as shame. We are not brave like humans. We know of your species, of the terrible world that forged you. A planet where the very ground splits open to swallow cities, where storms can level entire continents, where 1,000 different predators hunt those who show weakness. Sarah felt a chill of understanding. You think we're monsters? No, Zektar said quickly, the bioluminescent display flickering rapidly. We think you are strong. We think you are what we need to become if we are to survive. The next 2 days were a blur of activity as the human fleet worked frantically to establish defensive positions around the Zilani homeworld. Chief Engineer Park and his teams worked around the clock to modify the planet's communication arrays into sensor networks. Commander Vasquez studied every scrap of intelligence about Korthak military doctrine, while training Zilani volunteers in basic tactical principles. It was hopeless, of course. 5 human ships against what intelligence suggested was a fleet of over 30 Korthak vessels. But Sarah had learned long ago that hopeless situations were often where humans performed their best. The enemy arrived exactly when Zektar predicted, dropping out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. The Korthak ships were massive, crude-looking vessels that prioritized firepower over elegance. Each one could have destroyed the human fleet single-handedly. War Leader Grix's transmission was broadcast on all frequencies, his voice a harsh growl that the translation matrix struggled to process. Zilani cowards, your time of hiding is over. Surrender your crystal formations and perhaps some of you will be permitted to serve as slaves. Resist, and we will burn your world to ash. Sarah activated the fleet communication system. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Force. The Zilani people are under our protection. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences. The laughter from the Korthak command ship was like grinding metal. Humans. The galaxy whispers of your species. Deathworlders too stupid to know when they are outnumbered. You have 5 ships, we have 30. Surrender now, and we will grant you swift deaths. Counteroffer, Sarah replied calmly. Leave now, and we won't have to embarrass you in front of your crew. What followed was not a battle in any traditional sense. It was a masterclass in asymmetric warfare, a demonstration of what happened when rigid military doctrine encountered creative desperation. The Korthak fleet advanced in perfect formation, expecting the humans to either flee or form a defensive line. Instead, the 5 human ships scattered in different directions, using the planet's gravity well and magnetic field to slingshot around the world at impossible angles. But it was the Zilani who turned the tide of battle. Inspired by human courage and guided by Commander Vasquez's tactical expertise, they activated their planet's crystal formations in a way that had never been attempted. The massive crystalline structures began to resonate, creating a harmonic frequency that overloaded Korthak electronics. War leader Grix watched in growing disbelief as his formation dissolved into chaos. Ships collided with each other as their navigation systems failed. Weapons discharged randomly as targeting computers crashed and rebooted. The elegant death machines of the Korthak Empire had been reduced to flying scrap metal by singing crystals and human ingenuity. "This is impossible," he roared over the communications channel. "You are primitives. Your technology is inferior." Sarah's voice came back calm and steady. "You're right about our technology, but you made one critical error, War Leader Grix." "What error?" "You assumed that superior technology makes you superior warriors. But technology is just a tool. It's the mind behind the tool that wins battles, and you've been fighting enemies who think exactly like you do. We don't." The battle ended not with a climactic explosion, but with the systematic dismantling of Korthak confidence. Half their fleet was disabled, the other half was fleeing, and War Leader Grix found his command ship surrounded by human vessels that had appeared from directions his sensors said were impossible. "This isn't over, humans," he snarled as his ship prepared to retreat. "The Empire will return with overwhelming force." "We'll be ready," Sarah replied simply. As the Korthak fleet disappeared into hyperspace, the human ships regrouped around the Zilani homeworld. On the surface, crystalline cities pulsed with celebratory light as an entire species experienced something they had never known before: victory. Zektar stood beside Sarah on the observation deck of the Defiant, both of them watching the light show below. "Your people have given us a gift more precious than we can ever repay," the Zilani said quietly. "What's that?" "Hope. For the first time since the attacks began, we believe we can survive. More than that, we believe we can be strong." Sarah smiled, remembering her conversation with Admiral Knox what seemed like a lifetime ago. "Zektar, we didn't come here to make you strong. You were already strong. We just helped you remember." News of the victory spread across the galaxy faster than any ship could travel. The story grew in the telling. 5 human vessels had defeated a Korthak fleet 30 times their size, not through superior firepower, but through courage, creativity, and an absolute refusal to abandon those who needed help. Other species began to send their own distress calls to Earth, hoping that the mad Deathworlders who fought impossible battles would answer their pleas as well. The age of human isolation was over. But for Sarah Chen, standing on the bridge of the Defiant as they prepared for the long journey home, the victory was simpler and more personal. Somewhere in the darkness between stars, someone had called for help, and humanity had answered. That, she thought, was who they were. That was who they would always be.